Good morning, everyone. What's going on? We're going to talk about SR SIBO BZX 2021-059. Now, this is a notice of filing and immediate effectiveness of a proposed rule change to exempt certain categories of investment companies registered under the Investment Company Act of 1940 from the requirement to obtain shareholder approval prior to the issuance of securities in connection with certain acquisitions of the stock or assets of an affiliated registered investment company. That sounds beautiful. Purpose. The exchange proposes to amend Rules 14.10 E1A and E to exempt certain categories of investment companies registered under the 1940 Act from the requirement to obtain shareholder approval. That doesn't sound good. Now, the exchange proposes to amend Rules 14.10 E1A and 14.10 E1E to exempt certain categories of the requirement to comply with the shareholder notification rule in connection with the acquisition of the stock or assets of an affiliated registered investment company in a transaction that complies with Rule 17A-8, mergers or affiliated companies. Now, specifically, the exchange proposes to exempt from the shareholder approval provision described herein portfolio depository receipts as provided under Rule 14.11b, as well as managed investment companies that are index fund shares, managed fund shares, managed portfolio shares, ETF shares, and tracking fund shares, as defined in the rules. So, of course, they're going to be exempting ETFs and all the underlying, primary markets shit, because that's all they have to use. So, congratulations, Gary, you're doing it. In general, the requirement to obtain shareholder approval prior to the issuance of securities in connection with certain acquisitions of the stock or asset of another company is designed to give existing shareholders a vote on the issuance of stock that may dilute their voting or economic rights. Much like what we saw with AMC, I came up with a vote. We had the choice of vote of diluting or not, and we chose no. The exchange notes that Exchange Rule 1410 I1 is also intended to give shareholders a vote on transactions where a director, officer, or substantial shareholder of the listed company has a significant interest in the company or assets to be acquired. For the reasons described below, as well as the protections embedded in Rule 17A-8, the exchange believes that these concerns are limited with respect to 1940 Act securities. Therefore, the exchange believes it is appropriate to exempt issuers of 1940 Act securities from having to obtain shareholder approval under exchange rules, which can be both time-consuming and expensive. Oh, I'm sorry that it's time-consuming and expensive to, give shareholders their rights, but who cares? So under this rule, an affiliated merger must be approved by a majority of the outstanding votes securities of the merging company that is not the surviving company, unless certain conditions are met. However, Rule 17A-8 does not require the surviving company, for example, the fund issuing shares in the merger, to obtain the approval of its shareholders. When the Commission proposed amendments to Rule 17A-8, it specifically sought comment on whether the outstanding votes of securities of the fund that will survive the merger should also be required to approve the merger. Importantly, the Commission ultimately did not include a requirement of approval of shareholders of the surviving company in its final rule. Now, given that Rule 17A-8 does not require a surviving company of the 1940 Act securities to obtain shareholder approval in the context of a merger or affiliated companies, the exchange believes it is appropriate to exempt such issuers of 1940 Act securities from having to comply with Exchange Rule 1410-IL. As described above, the exchange only proposes to exempt issuers of 1940 Act securities from having to comply with Exchange Rule 14.10 if they are issuing shares to acquire the stock or assets of an affiliated registered investment company. Notwithstanding the proposed exemption, the exchange believes that the same provisions of Rule 17A-8 that protect against dilution also provides safeguards for existing shareholders when the transaction involves a director, officer, or substantial shareholder of the listed company that has a significant interest in the company or assets to be acquired, or the consideration to be paid, and therefore may benefit from the transaction. Because the board of each merging company must make an affirmative determination that the transaction is in the best interest of its investment company, that the transaction will not result in dilution for existing shareholders, there is reduced concern that existing shareholders will be disenfranchised as a result of the exchange's proposed exemption. So basically, a majority of the directors that are not interested persons of the respective investment company must firmly determine that 1, participation in the merger is in the best interest of the respective investment company, and 2, that the interest of their shareholders will not be diluted as a result of the transaction. So, in essence, we're providing people an exemption from all this shit from acquisitions involving ETFs, index funds, all that stuff, because they feel like they're more suited to make these decisions, and it may benefit retail because we're getting our voting rights taken away. Sure, bud. This one sucks. Good job, Gary.